Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to the Aurum podcast, where we discuss all things regarding the workplace. I'm your host. My name is Tori Kuria, and I'm glad that you could join us. My apologies. Today we have begun a bit later than usual. Technical issues, but we are indeed live. This is the month of August, and being a new month, as I had promised last week, we have a new discussion topic on this particular podcast. And as I always say, this podcast is hosted by Aurum Consultants, a human resource and risk advisory company. And here, what Aurum Consultants does is that it helps, essentially, we help companies build winning teams. Now, as I said, this month we have a new topic that we're going to discuss, and we are so excited that we would have this opportunity to discuss it with you. And to help me bring this into into contact today are two ladies who I'm sure you have. If you've been watching our podcast, you will always be seeing them. My co-hosts are the managing director Aurum Consultants, Madam Zipporah Kuria. Welcome, Zippy.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, viewers. Good evening, wherever you're watching us from. Glad to be here this morning, this evening, this afternoon.
Awesome. Indeed, we serve a global audience. And today, our main guest is Madam Martha Thuku. She's a HR specialist. She has been in this podcast several times, and today she'll help us deconstruct what we're about to discuss. Welcome, Martha.
Good morning, viewers, and thank you so much, Tony, for this opportunity as we discuss this topic.
Awesome. Now, najua nimewafanya mkarudukwa na mate kidogo, wondering what we are talking about. Now, this month we want to discuss transitions. Transitions, basically what happens in the workplace. As you know, transitions happen, you find yourself entering into an entity. That's a transition because you are transiting into an organization. There's transitions of being promoted, so you're leaving one level of operations to another. There are transitions whereby sometimes companies can transit employees either through retirement, either through dismissals. Unfortunately, there could be even unfortunately transitions by an employee passing on, or there could be transitions of you transiting, moving to another job, not in a bad way, but you know uh, opportunities open up and you transition to something else. So transition uh, is an inevitable part of our human existence in the workplace and even in our own personal lives. Today, in particular, we want to discuss workplace transitions. And as you know, workplace transitions can be a significant challenge for any organization. This is because they can have huge impact on employee morale, productivity, and revenue, which calls for careful planning and communications. So today we want to discuss how you can employ a successful transition strategy to enable a smooth move forward. Now, Madam Zipporah, let's begin with you. uh, now, basically, I'm sure even our viewers and listeners are wondering transition in the workplace, handling this issue of transition in the workplace. So basically, let me start with this first thought. How do you, as a manager, either HR manager or you're a general manager, you are the CEO of the company, you are the one who is deciding how things are working, could be the entrepreneur, you're running, transitions are happening. How do you handle transitions in the workplace?
Thank you, Anthony. And you've put it very well in terms of transitions. Can happen in many different ways. It can happen through retirement. It can happen through terminations. It can happen through promoting an employee to a totally different role. It could happen through transfers from one location to another, sometimes from one country to another. And I think transition times can be very stressful seasons for both the employee and also the person handling that transition. The HR, the business person handling the transition, it can be a very, very stressful period. And this need to be handled with a lot of care, with a lot of concern, with a lot of consultation. You can't just wake up in the morning and decide to transition an employee and tell them, I want you to report to Mombasa tomorrow, or I want you to relocate to a totally different country in a week's time. You have to put in a lot of considerations as a person handling these transitions. And there's quite a number of things that you must do when there's a transition that is going to happen. Because really, you don't wake up in the morning and realize all of a sudden you need to transition someone, whether it's a retirement, whether it's a transfer, whether it's a termination. Unless it's a termination that is probably occasioned by a disciplinary, which still needs meticulous planning and it needs process to be followed. So during transition, I think it's important for us to factor in a number of things. We need to do very clear planning. We need to communicate very well to the employees. We need to make them understand why we're transitioning them. Because if they don't understand first why you're transitioning them, it can become a big challenge that affects actually the morale of that particular employee and even other employees who are watching because they're thinking, I could be next. If the organization has created a culture where, people are just moved from one location to another and there's no clear policy or there's no clear understanding from the employee's perspective, how do we transition someone to another location or to another branch or, to a different role? Is there a way is there a policy that is in place? Is there a planned way how this happens so that when it happens, I'm not feeling as an employee like I'm being ambushed? Sometimes employees will feel, okay, I am used to doing things this way. I am used to reporting into this office. And I don't know what mother's experience is, but a lot of times you will find when an employee gets a job, most of the time they will tend to live in a location that is too convenient for them to be able to report to work. So the moment you decide to make a transition, not necessarily a termination, but maybe it's a transfer, then you need to have a consideration, where do they live? How is this going to affect their livelihood? How is it going to affect their financing? And as an employer, you have a right to be able to actually transition an employee from one location to another. And a lot of times we put this in the contract, but it doesn't mean you do that without planning. It's important for you to plan. It's important for you to communicate to the employee. It's important for them to understand. Probably it will help them in their career growth. They need to be able to see that. If they don't see that, then they will be very unhappy. And sometimes you can lose very good employees during a transition period. Sometimes we also need to make sure we are taking care of their well-being in terms of the mental aspect of it. Assuming it's, and I know we'll delve into this into particular probably areas of different transitions. Assuming it's someone, and I know Mother has a lot of experience on this, you're transitioning someone out of a job. It's a retirement. They've been working for you for 20 years, 40 years, and all of a sudden, they are going to leave employment. How do you transition that person in a way that it's humane, in a way that still does not affect the morale of the employees, in a way that is motivating, and people are not afraid when transitions come? It could be a termination. Maybe it's in the NGO, funding has come to an end. How do we prepare the employees psychologically to understand transitions will happen, because they are always happening and they are going to affect me at one time or another? So how are we going to handle that? How are we giving them that mental psychological support for them to be able to handle that in a good way? I've seen situations where, if contracts are pegged on funding, where, we plan very well. By the time we transition this employee, they didn't just wake up and realize I was going to be transitioned. Actually, they have known. And sometimes we'll even give them like a 3 months notice and tell them, in another 3 months, your job is coming to an end. So please start looking for a job. So it should never be a surprise to the employee, because the moment you do that, it affects them psychologically, it affects their family. And sometimes you lose good employees actually during these seasons of transitions. So it's very important how we handle that. And I know I've engaged a number of people who, their transitions were not handled very professionally or very well. And I can tell you their lives have been shattered. By the time you collect the pieces together and, rebuild your life, you've lost a lot of time. And these people sometimes end up being very bitter. And they end up, and that's why sometimes you hear HR being blanketed, and it's not a good way to handle people. We need to handle people with a lot of care and with a lot of concern, and putting the human face into it, because it's affecting their life, and it can affect their life in a way that it's completely either messes them up or builds them up.
Wow, wow, wow. Zippy, you have really laid a good foundation for this discussion, not even just for today, but for the rest of this month. You have, brought in, the various aspects from transition to into a company, transition within a company, transition outside the company. And Madam Martha, I'm sure you have, from being an HR executive, I'm sure this is something you have handled many times. What's your point? What's your view about how to handle workplace transitions well?
Thank you, Tony, for that. When Zippy said that you don't just wake up and transfer someone to Mombasa, I remembered some years ago in a different government, there was this government official who was transitioned in the news, and he was in the jam
Oh my.
with his driver. So
Oh,
the driver had the news, and now the driver was telling him to come out of the car, because now the driver is assigned to that position.
oh my.
He's not assigned to him as a person. So
Oh my.
I remember that thing, and it is funny, and it's true. We have various transitions in workplaces that happen, and we have handled most of them. The easy one, let me say the easy one, is the dismissal one. I'm saying it is easy because if someone is being dismissed, it's something like fraud. So even you as HR, you're feeling like this is fraud. This is how fraud is treated. It is even in the Employment Act. Everything is laid down. And for something like dismissal like that, the most important thing is to ensure you follow the law, because
Yes.
then it's articulated. And I remember we had a podcast here with a lawyer, and she told us that for the law, when you go to court, they don't consider what the staff has done. They consider the process you have used to get that person out of your organization. So it's not even the issue, it's actually the process. And the good thing is they have laid down that process. So it is very important for dismissals to follow that process. Some organizations just wake up and just decide they don't want to work with someone. It can be very expensive for that organization,
Yes.
because then if there's
Yes.
no due process followed, no matter what that person did, you might find you are the one who is going to suffer. And then also the process should not be, because you have been told there needs to be a process, then you don't go witch hunting for that process. You don't look for information. So
Yes.
how the dismissal thing can be bad is when you're not following the facts. So you are just hunting for information so that you get rid of that person. So once you unpack, so that's why I said that is the most easy way separation or point, because it is actually written in the in the law. Now the other various, and Zippy mentioned, and you, Tony, mentioned quite a number of different transitions in the organizations. They come because of many things. There are those that come with redundancies, which come because of economic crisis. Like during COVID, we saw a lot of organizations shutting down or
Yes.
cutting cutting their salaries or cutting their staff.
Yes.
So because of just that economic recession, that happens. An organization can decide to re-engineer its operations. And then there's you'll find when that re-engineering happens, they don't need some skills they are using currently. Some things have to change because new skill need to come. You know,
Yes.
they like in the field where I work in the NGO sector, what mostly the transitions we suffer is donor funding cuts or projects come to an end, because you'll find like most donors will fund a project for a period of time.
Time.
So that
Yes.
project has a beginning and an end.
Yes.
And mostly it may not be beyond 5 years. So having been there for a while, we expect that staff know that the project is coming to an end.
Yes.
So because your contract is ending that day, so we are expecting that you know. And
Yes.
that is a wrong way of handling that, because we are human beings. So,
Yes.
and that's why we have these discussions, because it's good to handle, even if I'm aware that my contract is coming to an end, it's good to have a policy
Yes.
that will ensure that even as I come to this very bad news, there has been some comfort in
Yes.
the management of this whole thing. So, like the donor that funds my organization, the year ends in September. So, like now, for us, we are in that position where some projects will end, and so it's a make or break where how you handle that. Because what I learned many years ago is actually people who leave your organization are your ambassadors,
Very
and they
true.
could be ambassadors in a positive way or
Yes.
ambassadors in a negative
Negative.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked in an organization where one day we were called that we have our HR ways, we have won an award of a great place to work.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
they had not done any research using the managers or using us. So how did they get information? We learned that they went to the field and talked to the people who are down there. They also talked to ex-staff. And so we were like, wow. So we are promoted to this thing, and now we are the ones to train other organizations. How do you go about this great place to work thing?
Wow. Wow.
And
Yes.
it's because some people who left our organization actually went and said they are looking for opportunities to come back.
Aha.
And it's because how they were let go, there was no enmity. There was no hard feelings, there was no pain, and there was no, drama.
Yes.
So they went because the project came to an end and the organization doesn't have the funds to cater for their salaries.
Yes.
So it is very important, as ZP said, that you plan nicely when you are handling this kind of
Yes.
of transitions.
Yes.
Even if you are promoting someone, every kind of transition have some form of anxiety as far
Yes.
as someone is concerned.
Very true.
It doesn't matter what kind of transition you are handling, it brings in anxiety.
Anxiety. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you find like there's a case I had of some drivers who had mishandled fuel, and one of them was reported. And for some reason, because of the back and forth, it took a bit before we could kind of act on that, who was brought. So I got a call and I'm being told, that thing should not delay because the other drivers are anxious. So I'm thinking, why are you anxious? Why should you be anxious? In fact, I remember this morning, it's important that they be anxious. They are expecting a form of transition, so they are anxious. But then
Okay.
if you have been playing bad, it's okay to be anxious.
Yes.
So I realize any form of transition, even if it doesn't affect you as a person, you will suffer anxiety.
Yes.
And that's why organizations, it is important not to think that the only person affected is the one who is being transitioned. Even the ones who are remaining will be
Yes.
transitioned. If you are being
Yes.
transferred, Tony, and you are working with you as a
Yes.
colleague, I'm anxious.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So
That is true.
this thing of planning is so important. And then the other thing Zippy talked about is communication. I cannot overemphasize on communicate, communicate, communicate.
Yes.
Especially where the issues we have talked, recession, fund cuts, you're taking, people are going home for one reason or the other that is beyond your control.
Yes.
This has to happen because it's beyond your control. If you are asked, you would keep these people. So that communication cannot happen at the last part of the year when people are going. It is important, like early enough, when you see like, oh, COVID is affecting our sales. That is very important information to tell the staff what is happening. This is the current information I have as of now. Our
Yes.
sales were 80% before COVID. Right now, they are 50%. That is very important. And what would be the likely result of sales falling from 80% to 50%? From my thinking, the sales results are saying we may not be able to keep all of
Yes.
us, whether we
Yes.
like it or not.
Yes.
And you say right now, we have not really thought through how this will play,
Yes.
but there is a possibility that ABC can happen, and we will communicate once we get new information. So even if so the people feel valued, that you are considering that they're not just employees. There are some
Yes.
people who feel like they gave you a job, so you are like their servant, or you are their
Yes.
command, and
Yes.
you don't feel them. You have to have that empathetic approach to
Yes.
things. As you
Yes.
communicate the reality, you have the empathetic approach.
Yes. Yes.
So, and then when you get new information, you call another meeting. This is the new information. When we did our calculations, we realized the organization cannot sustain more than 5 people. Now, we are in the sales department. We are 10 in sales department.
Yes.
So what are we going to do to decide who are the 5 to stay? And you
Yes.
realize that time you will find that there's a lot of conniving, because I know Zippy, she's the CEO, and I know her, so I'll go and talk to Zippy and present myself. Then if Zippy chooses me out of my relationship with her, that's not an objective way of choosing the 5.
Yes.
The objective way, from what I have, so I'm giving my best practice. It may not be what you can do. You can do something differently, but from where I sit, I do something I call suitability interviews.
Yes.
And with those suitability interviews, I score them using the last 1 or 2 appraisals, and I rank from 1 to 10.
Yes.
And I also check whether there has been things in the file as you have been working, what has been coming out from your manager
Yes.
regarding your conduct at workplace. So those things, all those things come to play. And then once you rank 1 to 5, then you take the first 5 because you need 5.
Yes.
So you have, what that does, it makes you feel like you have made this painful process objective. So even you, as you go to sleep, and if when you stand before God, you will realize I made because it was out of my control that 5 people had to leave.
Yes.
This is the only way I felt like it's an objective way of choosing the 5.
Yes. Yes.
So it can't be, Zippy Toka, Tony Toka. No, Tony,
Mm.
you can stay.
Yes.
Martha, stay. So it can't be that way. That is not objective. People will hurt, people will hate you, and I can promise you they will not be your positive ambassadors. And when they ask, you not qualify for a great place to work. So
Oh, yes.
communication. Once you communicate fast and you have the initial information you communicate, you have the next initial information you communicate, then when you have the final details, the last details, you have communicated to everyone. Now it's a good thing to communicate to each person who is affected, one by one. And it's okay to ask someone, so how does this make you feel? And now that you're going, it's good to know now that you're going, what other plans do you have? And you're asking that because you had communicated beginning of the year. So people knew that there could be an issue by the end of the year. So when you leave here, what will you do? So you let that person talk, eh? So you're not the one talking. You let them talk and they tell you their plans. I remember I had a meeting like that some years ago. And the many people were being affected, and we were on a round table, and I remember one of the guys, I laughed, said, now, I have always wanted to marry a second wife. I'll go and take my pension, and now I marry a second wife.
Wow.
You can be amazed at the many things. So you just realize that's a mental issue right there. And now, as the HR, you also need to bring interventions that will ease people's minds. So some mental health talks are important. Some stress management talks are important. Even you bring in some financial wellness, because you need to understand, if I'm living and I have this pension, how should I work with it so that it works for me for the period that I'm not at
Yes.
work? So you bring those things in that make you empathetic, because truly you're not able to change the situation. So you can only manage them. And then finally, for every transition, there must be something in writing. If it's a transfer, there has to be a transfer letter, and it's effective which date. And then if I'm transferring, let's say you're in Nairobi and you're transferring to Mombasa, how will you be facilitated to settle in Mombasa? You have a policy that has maybe a relocation policy that maybe could have per diem. Do you give people an allowance of so many days for you to look for a house? You get. So how does that person settle in? So, and also now, the letters for people who are leaving the organization, communication in writing needs to be 30 days before. So you have had all these discussions, but then now what is in writing has to be 1 month's notice, especially if you have contracts reading that termination on both ways should be given 1 month's notice or 30 days notice. So you need to consider that and then make sure the written communication has 30 days notice. Most of all, for every form of transition, ensure that you are aligned with the law. Look for the legal aspects of that issue and ensure the organization meets the legal aspects. That's why if the contract says you communicate termination 30 days, make sure the letter
Yes.
reaches the staff 30 days before that time reaches. I have talked so much. I want to stop there. I would want Zippy to add more. Thank you.
Okay.
Wow. I think, Mother, you've articulated these issues very well when it comes to the issue of communicating to employees. And one of the things I wanted to stress, and you have put it actually, is considering what the law says about that particular transition, not operating from a place of ignorance, but whatever transition you might find yourself in as an organization, desire and find out, what does the law say about this? I need to retire some. What are the provisions in the law? I need to declare people redundant. COVID has come, it has affected the business. Like Mother says, sales are going down, and I need to exit people. Let's not be in a place where we are looking for flimsy way or easy ways to exit people. Because remember, and I always keep on saying this, if you're in the business of managing people, then you must love people. You must be
Yes.
empathetic. You must put yourself in their shoes. You must be the counselor. You must be the coach. You must be the person who is the backbone of the whole process. And it needs to be easy. You need to be the person who will say, no, we need to take people through counseling. We need to bring experts to talk to these people. Mother has touched on financial management. When you're transitioning an employee and they're actually transitioning out of employment, how is this decision going to affect them for the next couple of months? And yes, it's your right to transition them, but is there something you can do to give them a soft landing? And this comes in terms of how you plan. What is a plan? Mala starts quite a lot in terms of communication. Don't
Yes.
don't allow organization politics and gossip to be the way information gets leaked out. If you're in the management and there are plans that are in place to transition people, let information flow very well from top down in a way that is very well coordinated, in a way that it will not create panic in the organization. Sometimes you might communicate in a way that actually would end up affecting the business in a very negative way. So, how you communicate that message to the people is very critical. How the junior employee gets to hear that information, where and how, is so critical. They cannot get information, through, the grapevine, because the moment that happens, then it counts as actually what you're trying to achieve. Um, and it's good for us to be able to be in that place of saying, okay, we need to transition people. Have we explored all options possible? We have no option but to let people go, assuming it's a transition that is going to affect them in terms of them exiting the organization. So how do we prepare them? Because we don't wake up in the morning and find, oh, we need to transition. Is an issue of planning. And if you wake up and find yourself all of a sudden you need to transition someone, then, and it's not a disciplinary issue, which still has a process, then there's a problem in the way we are running the business, the way we are running the department. So we need to have a very coordinated way. We need to communicate in a way that the employee gets to understand. We need to allow platform for them to be able to give feedback, for them to be able to voice their concerns and their anxieties. We need to create an environment where they're able to, voice out how they're feeling and what they think probably, this should go. Sometimes that feedback is very important and it will help us in future. Sometimes it will help us in that particular transition. So give people the opportunity to ventilate. Sometimes conflicts will come up because of transitions. What environment are we creating to be able to manage those conflicts that will come up because of a transition that is happening? As HRs, as business people, we need to be equipped, we need to be ready, we need to understand the how, the why, and how do we manage people, and from a place of love. In the last podcast, I remember we were talking about leadership and how to serve with. And this is one area you must consider. How do I serve this person from a place of concern, from a place of love, from a place of empathy, because it's going to affect their life and they are going to carry the effects of that decision along with them. And those effects could be very detrimental. It could be something that would actually push them to the next big thing they need to do. But how we
Mm.
manage that process actually determines a lot. So very important for us HR professionals and business people to be able to understand that. And I think I saw someone commenting about the mental aspect, health aspect of it. And I think Mother Where Mother Works, they do that very well, where, we are able to employ the services of an expert who will come and basically help our people understand transitions are always happening. Transition is constant. It's the same way we say change is constant. And as a leaders in any organization, we need to constantly communicate that. Number one, so that people don't also get comfortable and sit in the organization. Then they feel it's my right to be here. I cannot be exited. And I think those are the difficult ones to exit. Wamejikingia mizizi. They know my home. This is where I belong. You cannot exit me. And those become very difficult. People have been in an organization for 40 years and you're trying to get them out. It's not easy. Some of them are very old. I mean, compared to our age, you're transitioning your mother out of a job. How are you going to handle that person? Because you don't want them to leave the organization, then end up in depression, then their life is shortened. You need to help them plan, because transitions are constant and that communication needs to be constant communication. It needs to be done in a way that is understood. They need to understand, why is this happening, what are the options I have. And as HR professionals, again, this is where we come in terms of counseling and coaching, and be able to show them this is not the end of life. There are many other opportunities out there, and you need to try different, opportunities based on, how you direct them. So very important for us to understand that as HR professionals.
Zippy, I wanted to add when you said an old person, I remembered when I was in the bank. And so I think at the time people used to retire at 55. And I think it reached a place where I think the bank wanted to change. And some people, especially those who have, the bank people, we used to go there when we are 23, 24. So you can imagine you have been there since you are 24 and now you are 55. You don't know any other place. Like even when you want documents for anything document, it's in your file. Like if you want your birth certificate, everything in your life has happened in the bank. And then the bank is telling these guys to go. I remember the guy who was in charge of our department, when he was asked to leave, he was remaining 2 years, I think, to retire. I think they were retiring at 60. He was remaining 2 years anyway. And so he was not ready to go. But they gave them something they used to call voluntary early retirement. He took the money, but he couldn't go. And so he kept coming to the office. And I remember the HR office telling us, please let him come until when he's ready to go. So my new boss who came in left the office, as we used to sit in an open plan, left the main office, gave him the office where he used to sit. So we used to buy him newspapers every morning. He comes, that time there were no laptops, there were those screen computers. And he's just there playing cards the whole day and stressing us because he was stressed. Martha, have you checked the letters today? He would really stress us, and we were so happy that he was exiting. But we were made to let him clean his own path of exiting. So he's not in the payroll. He has been paid all this money, but he was coming every morning at 6. He was in the office every morning at 6. The first 3 months, Then the next 3 months you would see he comes like 10 o'clock. But even when he comes at 10 o'clock, he will leave at 5. Then I think it took like almost 6 to 1 year to transition. Then he would come like a day or 2 days a week. And then one day he stopped coming. So that was an example of a good organization that cares for its staff and let them transition in their own way. So that example of my boss even today baffles me because he left healthy, he is alive, he's doing well. By the time he was finishing his emotional issues, he had already now established a new cohort of people now where he is going to go and hang out with them. So yeah, when you said that, I remembered that because these people have served you anyway, and the profits you have, it's them who made for you. When they came in when they were young, they were not even married. They got married in the organization, they got kids in the organization, the kids went to school in the organization, the kids have grown, some are getting married, the guy is still in the organization. You don't just wake up one day and tell him to leave. You need to give him that opportunity to be able now to transition to something different. Thank you.
Wow, wow. You ladies had a lot to talk about. I was just hearing the back and forth. And indeed, it shows that the passion that you have concerning transition. Some of us, and I'm sure a few of my my listeners and viewers will probably tell you guys, okay, that sounds very nice, but some of us have not undergone that kind of transition. I remember one transition I saw, which was very usual in that time I was in the banking career. I remember one time a branch manager telling the cash manager, today is on a Friday, on Monday you report to Mombasa branch. How you go, if you love your job, make sure you're on Mombasa, a certain branch in Mombasa by Monday. Whether you have a family, all those kind of things, that's your problem. I mean, that was a tactic used by that branch manager to send a message to that guy and to the rest of us. And that does happen many times. Martha, you've talked about somebody going on retire, all those kind of things. But the reality is, unfortunately, a bit different. Outside the NGO world, outside the, some people are just told tomorrow don't report to work. Yeah, casually. There's nothing like putting things in writing. Me, Kesho, yeah, we'll call you when we need you. And as Moaz Karanja has said, I think it's important for organizations to hire or contract a mental health specialist to guide affected employees during negative transitions. Training is also very important to prepare employees. Indeed, Moaz Karanja, that's a very good point that you've brought up. And in fact, even as we come to a close of our podcast today, we want to tell our viewers and listeners part of the thing that uh, companies can do to help their staff prepare for the inevitable transitions, whether it is promotions, whether it's transfers, whether it's probably transitions of leaving the company, you don't know what to do, or companies themselves to handle the transitions well legally and well also emotionally. We here at Aurum Consultants do provide trainings to help entities and employees to be able to handle workplace transition humanely and also in a legally correct manner to avoid issues that happen. Because these things happen lots of times, and you find cases going to court because the transition did not happen the way Martha and Zippy put it forward. You ladies have described it the way it should happen. But many times, organizations, big and small, handle transitions the way you handle a casual laborer, and here you're handling a manager. You find people being transitions in very bad ways. So, having said that, our time is really up. I want to thank you, Martha, for the very deep conversations that you've brought up, issues regarding planning and communication in various ways. Zippy, Thank you for setting the tone. In fact, even my second question that I had in mind about how do you communicate transition, you ladies picked it up and ran with it, and and put it in a good way. So, having said that, to you, our listener, you can always get in touch with us. Our contacts are at the bottom of the screen, by our email address, via Facebook, via YouTube, LinkedIn. Even our phone contacts are also available at the bottom of your screen. We are glad, we would love to help you as an organization, as an executive, handle your transitions well in a legally well and legally in the correct manner. And also, as we've had today, also humanely. Because if you mishandle transitions, those people who leave go telling others, huko tumetoka kulikuwaga XYZ. Huko, yeah, they start using certain words that are not good. So if you'd like to get in touch with us, you have the contacts at the bottom of your screen. This month, as I said, we'll be talking about transitions, and we will look at various facets of transitions. So, having said that, we have come to the end of our podcast today. Thank you for taking your time to join with us. Make sure you join us next week, even as this country makes its transition. Even the country is making a transition at the very top. The CEO of the country is making a transition. We're inevitably going to get a new CEO. So, Martin and Zippy put 48, 49 million Kenyans are on anxiety. They're wondering who will be the next CEO. So, hopefully, by next week, we will discuss. We will probably have a transition at the CEO level in this country, and inevitably, we will discuss more about transitions in various ways that affect us. So, Martha, thank you very much. Zippy, thank you very much. To you, our viewer and our listener, thank you very much for taking your Saturday morning. See you next Saturday, same time, same place, after the country has done its transition. Thank you.